centre of excellence. Thank you.
Michael Fabricant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, may I say how much I welcomed the answer by the current Secretary of State to my question about Lichfield. I think many of my constituents will be reassured by what he had to say. And can I say that if he is half as good as his predecessor, the Right Honourable Member for Derbyshire Dales, then he will be very good indeed. But, having said that, I'm afraid I must now, Madam Deputy Speaker, destroy this cosy consensus that seems to be prevailing on both sides of the House, and I shall explain why. When HS2 was first envisioned, people spoke about people in Manchester, in Leeds and Birmingham being able to get onto a high-speed train and ending up in Paris, in Lille, indeed even Berlin with Deutsche Bahn. But that's not to be. We heard from the front bench opposite that this is an integrated railway. But it's not, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's nothing like that at all. And let me give you a hypothetical situation. So, one of my constituents from Lichfield, together with his wife and 2 children and all their luggage, decide they're going to give up travelling by dirty aircraft and instead will travel by clean rail down to Paris. So what's the reality going to be? Imagine now, the wife, the children, the baggage. They get on the train at Lichfield City Station, but let me say this applies to stations up and down the country, and they end up at Birmingham New Street. And then what happens? They then have to leave Birmingham New Street with the 2 children and all their bags and walk for 22 minutes, and I want to praise at this point Councillor Tony Thompson in Lichfield, who has done this walk and timed it, without, though, the children and without all the bags. It took him 22 minutes to tramp across, here's me, tramping across Birmingham to get to Curzon Street to get HS1. And then can they relax, knowing that they will, in a moment, then can they relax, knowing they'll end up in Paris? No. Because instead the train arrives at Euston. Now, our Right Honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, when he was Mayor of London, pointed out quite rightly that Euston has a capacity problem, not with trains arriving, because Euston is going to be extended, but getting people away from Euston. There isn't the public transport. But even if there were sufficient capacity, they then have to tramp yet again, either down a series of escalators and back up again, with children, with all the bags, or they walk across London to get to St Pancras. And in a moment, and finally, when they get to St Pancras, they can settle on their train. So much for a quick and easy journey from the northeast, down to Paris. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman who's been trying several times.
I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman, the member for Lichfield. For 15 months, I was a member of the HS2 Bill Committee, and I did that very walk myself. I didn't get a friendly councillor to do it for me. I did it myself. It took about 6 to 8 minutes top whack, and I know that the route in future will be better than it was then, because there was an awful lot of construction work going on around New Street at the time. 6 to 8 minutes top whack.
The honourable gentleman is thin and lithe and athletic. I'm talking about a harried husband, a wife, squabbling children and loads of luggage. That's what I'm talking about. Of course I give way to my right honourable friend.
I'm really grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Can I just take him slightly closer to home? Not perhaps in his own constituency, but alongside. And those people who seek to commute from Rugby and Coventry and Birmingham International and the intermediate stations into Birmingham, whose daily journey is delayed by the fact that this line, two-track only, can only be two-track, has express trains, local trains, the intermediate trains to Northampton, even some freight trains on it, and it's chaotic and it's jammed all the time. And what HS2 does is it takes the express trains off and give those people a better commute into Birmingham. Isn't that something the West Midlands should champion?
My right honourable friend is absolutely right about that, because I don't think there is any argument about the capacity problem. And I think it was he who said that the West Coast, or perhaps it was my right honourable friend, but anyway, it is a fact that the West Coast Main Line is operating at 100% capacity, that it is the most busy line in Europe, and in fact, it's actually a triumph to the fact that people have moved onto their trains in their millions since the time when the Labour government was in power, and certainly since the time when it was nationalised and we all remember those curling sandwiches. So of course there are advantages too, but it could have been done in such a better way. It isn't a connected service. And what do we have now? The genesis of it all was Lord Adonis, who I think in 2007 came up with the idea of the route. And I can tell you he was astonished when the Conservative government accepted that route. And again, I'm saying very clearly, I'm not arguing against there ought to be an HS2. It's the way it's being executed is what I am criticising. And Lord Adonis wanted an ultra-high-speed line. So as a consequence, he got rulers on maps, drew straight lines, crashing through countryside which had previously not been damaged, destroying ancient woodlands, and generally messing the entire area. I will give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. He makes some very important point. I don't agree with, I think, the overall drift of where his speech is leading us to, but he makes a very good point, which is about the importance of connectivity. There is no point in spending billions of pounds on a brilliant new service unless connectivity is absolutely there. Would he agree with me is that when we look at other projects, we know that the ones that work, wherever they are in the world, are ones where you can get off one line and move swiftly and easily in comfort to another line or another piece of transport.
My right honourable friend is absolutely right. And that really is my main criticism of HS2, that it's not connected, that it's not integrated, that you can't get on in Birmingham and end up in France. It doesn't connect with HS1, and the sadness is that Arup originally came up with a proposal which would have done just that. The original Arup proposal would have been more on the surface, using existing transport corridors, so it would have been 10 to 12 billion pounds cheaper, and at the same time it would have been less environmentally damaging. And that would have made sense, and you would have been able to get onto a train at Birmingham New Street with their plan, and you would have ended up in France as a consequence. But no, because we were obsessed at that point with running at ultra-high speed, we decided we'd do this straight lines going through virgin countryside. And you know what the irony is, Madam Deputy Speaker? The irony is that because of all the kinks and the loops, thank goodness for that, thanks to my right honourable friend in part, the member for Derbyshire Dales, so it doesn't go smashing through the middle of Lichfield Cathedral or whatever, or indeed damaging Tatton, because I remember my former right honourable friend, George Osborne, he managed to get through kinks in the line as well. It can't now travel at ultra-high speed. So, quite frankly, with the benefit of hindsight, we could have had a more connected train service, one that was less environmentally damaging, £12 billion cheaper than the present one, and at the same time, something that people would cherish in years to come. Yes, they may cherish the route from Coventry to Birmingham, but I think that young people wanting to travel seamlessly to the continent by train will be sorely disappointed. Now, I mentioned how it would affect Lichfield. And I just want to mention that Phase 2A, and by the way, Lichfield has had a double whammy because we were affected by Phase 1 and now we're being affected by 2A as well. But Phase 2A will cause loss or damage to 18 ancient woodlands just on that short route, and the loss of 27 veteran trees between Lichfield and Crewe. And 27, yeah. And the point about ancient woodlands, yeah, don't knock though, you know, we're talking about ancient trees and ancient woodlands which can't be repeated. You can't dig them up and then replant them because, hey, they're not ancient anymore. The definition of an ancient woodland is that it has to be 400 years old with the soil structure which can only generate when it's 400 years old. Now, as my right honourable friend on the front bench said, all large infrastructure projects will cause damage, and of course I accept that. But if we'd gone with the original Arup route, which Lord Adonis thought would be far too slow, that would only run at high speed, not ultra-high speed, we wouldn't have had so much damage. Now, I'm very pleased to see in the chamber today my right honourable friend, anyway, the member for Poole. He ought to be right honourable if he isn't, because he chaired the Bill Committee for Phase 1. And I want to praise all the members who served on that committee, because the hope that I can offer my constituents, at least, is that if the committee is half as good, the one that will be set up if this bill goes through Parliament today, if it's half as good as his committee, then people can feel there will be improvement in committee. And if people petition, and petition well, there will be changes to the route. Finally, I just want to re-emphasise the point that I made earlier in a question to my right honourable friend. It is important that we don't lose sight of the West Coast Main Line and continued passenger services. I believe that there are 44 railway stations on the West Coast Main Line which are not going to be directly affected or be served by HS2. We still need our Virgin trains, and we still need our slower trains as well, the excellent service which is now being provided by London North Western, which succeeded London Midland, who incidentally started off badly but improved a lot, actually, during their franchise period. And there will come a time when the Pendolinos will become unusable because they've reached their age limit. It's hugely important that the Department for Transport begins to start thinking about a replacement service for that high-speed service. Because at the moment, Lichfield commuters don't just commute into Birmingham and Stafford and places like that. Lichfield commuters are commuting down to London daily. As one very senior guy in the BBC said to me, Michael, I don't have to send my kids to a private school. This is the BBC for you, but we know about their salaries. We don't have to send our kids to a private school because the schools are so good in Lichfield. And I can afford to live in a large house with lots of land around me, which of course I could never do in London. But that is thanks to the Pendolino service. Of course I give way to my honourable friend.
I thank him so much for giving way. While he's talking about broadcasters and where they would be located for their jobs, does he not think that HST is a great argument for Channel 4 to be relocated to the West Midlands? Because the Channel 4 executives could commute from London or wherever they like to live. They could live in Lichfield and make their programmes.
They could live in Lichfield. They could, yes, and they could be based in Birmingham. And I hope that Channel 4 will indeed move out of London. And I know it's completely out of order, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I'm putting in our bid now for the West Midlands on that. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've explained why I can't support this bill. I will not push my amendment to a vote. But if, as I expect, there is going to be a division on the substantial motion, I'm afraid that I will have to vote against the government on this occasion. It is a shame. My right honourable friend says it's a shame, and it is a shame. I very rarely vote against my own government because we are so successful in what we do. But this blindness about the design of HS2, which has permeated across to the Labour front bench as well. I couldn't believe it when the honourable gentleman said it's an integrated railway line, when it very clearly is not an integrated railway line. However, I will be voting against this motion, and I hope that other colleagues in this House will join me.
Order. For the convenience of the House, can I just confirm with the honourable gentleman that although he has announced that it's not his intention to push his amendment to a vote, he has nevertheless moved his amendment. It is his intention to move his amendment, which I believe he has just done over the last several minutes. I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman because that then allows me to say that the original question was that the bill be now read a second time, since when an amendment has been proposed as on the order paper. The question is that the amendment be made. Laura Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am pleased to be following the honourable member for Lichfield in this debate. I'm not sure if my speech will be quite as colourful.